of the recording. Good morning to those, or evening, or whenever it is that you're listening to the recording. Today, we're going to finish the that little unit we had. We sort of stepped off to the side when we were talking about politics and rabbis and endorsements, and even starting going back in a text from the before the Holocaust to the mayor's race in New York City. I felt we needed to go a little bit to the side here in a sense to find out what is all of this craziness about having to determine what exactly, not craziness, but at least a lot of dispute as to what does it mean to say anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism. Are they the same? Are they different? How does one sort of bleed into the other? So we're going to take a look at that today. And then after that, we'll start a new unit. Uh, Again, following in Rabbi Barmash's book, where she talks about our relation to sort of many larger issues. It's a smaller issue in her book about the burial of non-Jews in Jewish cemeteries, but that's a big issue nowadays, especially with the number of intermarried couples that we have, and people even thinking when they join a synagogue, you know, what are the rules? So we'll take a look at that, both from one of the sources from Rabbi Barmash's book, and then we'll see that the conservative movement has had some extensive writing about this, because this is a very real issue. Uh, we are familiar with the idea here in New Jersey about commercial Jewish cemeteries, but if you live in New York, you may not realize that throughout the rest of the country, most Jewish cemeteries are owned by the synagogues themselves. So the synagogues make the rules, as opposed to the businessmen who own Cedar Park, Bethel. So that gets a lot of issues. Okay, so I'm going to just start with one, just to make this thing a little very real, and some of you may be aware of this. I got to find the right text there it is, to share. Just to be certain that I don't know if you are all aware of this. As a rabbi, I periodically get emails asking me to sign petitions and to write to our legislators. Actually, I drove right by Lisa Swain, who was running along Fairlawn Avenue. Some of you may know that one of our local legislators is a triathlete. And if you drive around in the morning or go through the park, you can see her running very regularly. And this is right now, even as we speak, an issue in the New Jersey State Legislature. So you'll see how real and current this issue is, to talk about politics and taking stands on certain issues. I will tell you, I took this just out of Google, because I thought just a quick summary just to make us aware of. As of February 2026, the New Jersey Legislature has not yet codified a formal state definition of anti-Semitism, as the primary legislative effort recently stalled, right? There was a bill that tried to adopt the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance working definition of anti-Semitism, which we will take a look at this morning in detail, see what it says and see what the objections were, because there are two battling, shall we say, definitions of anti-Semitism, which has a lot to do with the topic we're talking about, anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism, okay? Although it received significant bipartisan support and 54 sponsors in the Assembly, the bill was pulled due to concerns regarding its potential impact on free speech and criticism of Israel. We'll take a look at that. The proposed definition, we will look at the current, we'll take a look at the issues and what the controversies are. And the current status: chose not to advance the bill for a final vote due to insufficient support. Separately, other bills have introduced to establish a permanent New Jersey anti-Semitism task force to study and propose solutions to anti-Semitism. Just point out there is no easy solution to anti-Semitism. I think we all know that. but there's certain things that can and should be done. But this is just a reminder that yes, this whole issue is very current within our own state. Okay, so what's this relationship between anti-Zionism and now anti-Semitism? Now we did start looking at that last week. I'm going to take those some of the definitions we saw, and then we're going to go back to some to this IHRA definition. Were many of you familiar with this issue that it was an issue in our state? Curious.
Yes,
You and Charlie, you're up.
yes, I heard about it.
Well, Charlie, we know you're up on the politics, which we appreciate. I don't know if the rest of you are aware that this has come up several times, and each time it comes up, I get a petition or a note. Send these letters to your legislators and ask them to sign on. So I've been known to do that. Now, last week we took a look at anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism from the American Jewish Committee. Is a long-standing organization defending Jewish interests in the United States and throughout the world. Well-known, well-funded. When you talk about establishment Jewish institutions, this is one of them, one of the major ones, one of the major communal organizations. And we looked at this last year. The belief that Jews alone or the peoples of the world do not have a right to self-determination is inherently bigoted. When Jews are verbally or physically harassed or Jewish institutions are vandalized in response to actions of the state of Israel, it is anti-Semitism. Today, in the Times of Israel, it was reported in Canada, Palestinian groups are asking the Canadian government to remove the official registration or the official licensing of Jewish summer camps in Canada because they have on their staff Israelis, and therefore Israelis are genocidal and should not be in Canada, and the camps should lose their licenses.
Rabbi,
That's where things have been going.
Rabbi,
Yes, sir.
to me, anti-Semitism is if you're a Jew. Anti-Zionism is if you're a Jew, part of a nation of Israel.
Right. Well, we'll see why this gets a little messy and hard to define, and we'll see the definitions, and we'll see how that has become really a political issue in some areas. Okay, is all criticism of Israel anti-Semitic? No, right? Criticism of Israel, similar to any level over any other country, cannot be regarded as anti-Semitic. When anti-Zionists call for the end of the Jewish state, that is no longer criticism of policy, but rather anti-Semitism. Now, here's we'll see. We're actually going to take a closer look at the exact wordage. Okay, and the question of BDS, when some people think BDS is just a way of saying Israel shouldn't do things,
To do something.
the aim of BDS is to
Why is this happening?
so was there a question? Sorry. No? Okay. The aim of BDS is the elimination of the state of Israel. ADL also has their definitions. Anti-Zionism is anti-Semitic and can take on different forms. Punishing Jews and Jewish institutions who feel a connection to Israel. By the way, sometimes anti-Zionists attack Jews indiscriminately, right? Jews because they're Jews, right? Applying classic anti-Semitic tropes to the Jewish state. You know, the Jewish state is trying to take over the world. It's full of people who do all the nasty things that Jews have done in the past, exploiting Jewish trauma by invoking the Holocaust. You know, the Israelis are Nazis, rendering Jews less worthy of nationhood and self-determination than other peoples. Okay. Criticism of Israel can be anti-Semitic if the criticism includes anti-Jewish rhetoric, promotes views aimed at delegitimizing Israel and Jewish nationhood, or uses language or slogans that demonize the Jewish state and its supporters. Okay, those are eight organizations. This is ADL. We saw the AJC. But so let's take a real look at what they're arguing about. Okay. Here we go. Let's start with the IHRA definitions. Now, the IHRA definition is the one that was proposed to be accepted by the state of New Jersey and has not been, because as we saw, there are some questions. Does it limit free speech? Does it call all criticism of Israel anti-Semitic? Let's see. Let's find. Is that what's going on? Well, let's take a look. So the IHRA, right, the International Holocaust. Where is it? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm getting to the top. Fine. International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance. Well, what is that? Who is that? Okay, an intergovernmental organization, 35 member countries. Excuse me, one liaison country, 7 other observer countries, founded in 1998 by the Swedish prime minister, right? Not by Israel, not by the United States, but by somebody in Sweden. Unites governments and experts to strengthen, advance, and promote Holocaust education, remembrance, and research worldwide. The deniers are out there. I did something rather on Facebook. I made a comment. Those of you who've been to Auschwitz know that at one point, at one spot in Auschwitz, there is a rectangular structure in the ground. It's a basin for water. As I walked by it with a guide when I had a private tour of Auschwitz, the guide said, "This is a basin of water. It was used by the Nazis so that they have water to fight fires." But then he said to me, "But the Holocaust deniers say that it is a swimming pool. You see, they had a swimming pool in Auschwitz, therefore Auschwitz wasn't such a bad place." And I saw on the Facebook somebody say that this was a swimming pool at Auschwitz. So I posted on Facebook, "No, this is not a swimming pool." An expert on the Holocaust walked by with me, and he said it was this, and the deniers. Well, the deniers, I must have had 20 or more posts saying no, that I was wrong, that it was obviously a swimming pool. And again, they're out there. You know, we have to remember that they're out there. And I just saw it myself. Maybe I was foolish in posting that. Okay. Here. So who's a member of this group? Whoops. Oh, here it is. I have that. Okay. These are all the countries that have signed on to this definition. You can see it's from all over the world: Europe, South America, most of the countries of Europe, organizations, the European Union, the OAS, and so on. So what is it about? So what is the definition? Where does this controversy come from? So let's take a look at that. Okay, let's get the definition. Here, whoops. Okay, non-legally binding work. It's a working definition. The working definition of anti-Semitism. Okay, anti-Semitism is a certain perception of Jews which may be expressed as hatred towards Jews. Rhetorical and physical manifestations of anti-Semitism are directed towards Jewish or non-Jewish individuals and or their property, toward Jewish community institutions and its religious facilities. Notice, by the way, again, anti-Semitism does not have the hyphen. Because anti-Semitism is not about Semites. Anti-Semitism is a phenomenon that has to be defined in and of itself, not as you might think, because it's just people who don't like, quote, Semites. That's not what it is. Okay. So they give you some examples. So this is where things get controversial. Okay. And there are many things that are fairly, I think, all agreed. So they give you these examples, right? Harming Jews, demonizing stereotypical things, accusing Jews of being responsible for wrongdoing, denying scope, mechanisms, or intentionality of the genocide of the Jewish people, accusing the Jewish people or Israel as a state of inventing or exaggerating the Holocaust. Okay. Where it gets controversial is, you'll notice they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 examples. And of the 11 examples, it is true starting here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of them mention Israel. Now, what do they say about Israel? Well, we look at the first one. Accusing Jewish citizens of being more loyal to Israel with the alleged priorities of Jews worldwide than to the interest of their own nations. That's the dual loyalty. Now, here's where it gets tricky. Here's where people have denying the Jewish people their right to self-determinations by claiming that the existence of the state of Israel is a racist endeavor, which we have seen, right? The idea that, yeah, it is a Jewish state, and people don't like that. Applying double standards by requiring of it behavior not expected or demanded of any other democratic nation. If Israel does something that is considered to be inappropriate, that standard is not applied to another country, and that Israel is singled out for whatever it is that whatever evil that they see. Okay. Okay. Then they go on using symbols of drawing okay, holding Jews responsible. Okay. Let me go. I want to go further with this.
What's wrong? What's the big problem with that is that it equates anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism.
Yes, right.
They're different.
This clearly, and we should be clear. I have it in. There it is. I think it's right here. Is it the same one? I need to find. There's another document I have that gives more examples from there. Nation. Just want to be just want to be no, I just want to be sure I have all of that statement from there so we can see what they are. We're going to look at a different a different example. Okay, 1 second. Another one, the one. I apologize for this. I thought I had opened it up earlier today. Now I can't seem to find it. Okay. All right. But the point is, you're right. What this one does is to say right. Sorry, I need to get back to this and share screen. Okay. This question is, this one does say that you can be critical of the state of Israel, and that does not make you an anti-Semite. Okay. But it does say, I'm sorry, I really apologize here. I'm having trouble with opening up this document again. Okay, it's open. I just want to go back to it.
If I'm an Italian, I can say I'm part of the Italian nation. Same thing,
Right.
I should be able to say that if I'm a Jew, I'm part of the Jewish nation.
Right. Would you be considered to be anti-Italian? You said, I love Italians. I love Italian wine. I love Italian opera. But I think the state of Italy has no right to exist and should be eliminated as a state. That would be an obviously contradictory sense. I love Italians, but the state of Italy shouldn't exist. And that's the question that is raised here, right? denying the Jewish people their right to self-determination by claiming that the existence of the state of Israel is a racist endeavor. That is where they are saying that that is anti-Semitism. If you say that the state of Israel is a racist endeavor and should not exist, that is anti-Semitism. Now it gets so why is that how has that become controversial? Because there's another definition of anti-Semitism, which others let me get this. It is okay. It's called the Jerusalem Declaration. Okay. The Jerusalem Declaration on Anti-Semitism. So people say, I like the IHRA, which we just saw, but then others say, no, I like the Jerusalem Declaration. A declaration of the product of an initiative originated in Jerusalem, right? The Jerusalem Declaration on Anti-Semitism responds to what we just read. This is a response saying, now, wait a second, that other one is wrong. We think it's wrong. That came in 2016. We have sought to improve it, okay? And our aim is to strengthen the fight against anti-Semitism by clarifying what it is and how it is manifest, to protect a space for open debate about the vexed questions of the future of Israel-Palestine. Now, I will point out this declaration is mostly, and I'm going to show this in a second, been signed. Oops, let's go to the top. As you can see, this is a long list. Here we go. And if you look at the list, these are mostly academics. People who university teachers. I mean, I'm just going to go through this, but you notice that almost every single one of them is a professor. Notice professor, 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 distinguished professor. Danny Boyarin was one of my Talmud teachers at the Jewish Theological Seminary when I was in rabbinical school. These are all, you'll notice, professors, directors of different types. These are all professors, and the list is long. But academics. So this is someone in people from the academic world. So how do they differ from the other one? And what's the issue? Okay, and they agree, but here is where they do agree, but here's where they disagree. Okay, applying symbols of negative stereotypes of classical anti-Semitism to the state of Israel, holding Jews collectively responsible for Israel's conduct. Okay, requiring people because they are Jewish publicly to condemn Israel or Zionism. That, by the way, is a side note. That is very good to see in here, because in this type to say that, oh, you can only be part of our university community or our progressive world if you say that you're a Jew is by saying that you oppose the state of Israel. That has become a litmus test, right? And then here's where they go. Israel and Palestine, examples that are on the face not anti-Semitic, okay? Supporting the Palestinian demand for justice and full grant of their political, national, civil, and human rights. Again, not controversial. Criticizing or opposing Zionism as a form of nationalism or arguing for a variety of constitutional arrangements with Jews and Palestinians in the area between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean. It is not anti-Semitic to support arrangements that accord full equality to all the inhabitants between the river and the sea, that's the Jordan River and, of course, the Mediterranean, whether in two states, a binational state, unitary democratic state, federal state, or in whatever form, i.e., supporting positions that would eliminate Israel as the Jewish state. They are saying it is not anti-Semitic to believe in and to promote the solution, quote, to the problems in the Middle East by eliminating the state of Israel as a Jewish state. There's where they get that's where you have this controversy. Okay. Evidence-based criticism of Israel as a state. Okay, so that is, again, not anti-Semitic. I think we would agree with that. Now he's talking about BDS. Boycott, divestment, and sanctions are commonplace nonviolent forms of political protest. They are not in and of themselves anti-Semitic, although the founders of the BDS movement made it very clear when they founded the BDS movement that the intention of the BDS movement is to eliminate the state of Israel. Okay, and here's where we go. Political speech does not have to be measured, proportional, tempered, or reasonable to be protected under the freedom of speech. Okay, criticism that some may see as excessive or contentious or as reflecting a double standard is not in and of itself anti-Semitic. In general, the line between anti-Semitic and non-anti-Semitic speech is different from the line between unreasonable and reasonable speech. So what are they saying? How do they differ? The IHRA say if you are promoting the elimination of the state of Israel as a Jewish state, that's anti-Semitic. This group is saying it is not necessarily anti-Semitic. Okay. And this group is saying that if you say it is anti-Semitic to say that the Jewish state is a racist state and should not exist, or is a genocidal state and should not exist, you've crossed the line. This statement is saying, well, you have freedom of speech to say that. And this controversy that we see about these definitions is based upon this issue is that, well, I'm protected by freedom of speech to say whatever I want to say versus what you are saying, the content of it denies a very basic part of Judaism, i.e., that we are entitled to a Jewish state in our historic homeland by denying that you are anti-Semitic. And that's really where we have this contention. All right, comments or questions about that so far? Okay. I hope that helps for us to try to understand what's going on and the claims, but the IHRA clearly says you can criticize the state of Israel, but when that criticism passes over to it should not exist because it's a genocidal state or whatever, then you've moved into anti-Semitism, and that's where the difference is. Okay, comments?
To me, there are two issues here. One, if you're a Jew, you can be an anti-Semite. But you're anti-Zionist if you are part of the Israel nation.
Well, again, that goes into definitions. Are we a nation or a religion? And it gets
exactly.
It gets a little. Yes, it does. Yeah, no one would claim that the Satmar are anti-Semitic, even though they are anti-Zionist. It gets a little, but that's about the Satmar. What we are seeing in the progressive religious circles is this connection between anti-Semitism, and they're saying things that, again, and I would say, I believe in the IHRA definition that an essential part of being Jewish is a belief in our connection to the land of Israel and our right to self-determinations and our right to have a Jewish state. And when you deny that, again, I would say you've crossed over into anti-Semitism. But okay, let's see how this is. Let's take a look at this. And then we want to take a look at this article by Shaul Kellner, professor of Jewish studies. Yes, he's at Vanderbilt. Okay, Vanderbilt's in Nashville. So yeah, actually, I know him. I've met him a number of times. He got to Nashville just as I was leaving. We overlapped for about a year when I was there. And he's trying to define what is American anti-Zionism? How do we understand it? And notice he brings these flyers. One thing really struck me when I saw these flyers. Anyone want to comment on these flyers?
Not Brooklyn for Gaza.
Okay. Any comment? I'll make a comment. Notice this one. In other words, these are being printed up for any organization to use. We're going to show that we protest against, we're in favor of Palestine. What is this?
It's the invader on October 7th.
Thank you. This is Hamas. Right there. Did this have to be in the flyer? No. But It's one thing to say we're in favor of Palestinians, and it's quite another thing to say, and it has been said at some of these protests, promoting and being in favor of Hamas. If you're in favor of Hamas, then you're favoring the horrible things of terror and terrorism. And notice that they felt that they needed to put this in. That really, I have to tell you, looked very, very disturbing. Okay. All right. So here's this article about now. He's a sociologist. Okay. And he's trying to understand, as I said last week, how do you define anti-Zionism? Is it defined by the dictionary? Is it defined by its history? Is it defined by what people say? Or is it defined by what people do? And notice he has also taken the, as I again mentioned, the hyphen off, saying that we understand anti-Zionism as a phenomenon. It's not just a question that these are people who oppose Zionism as a theoretical or philosophical or political issue, but that anti-Zionism is a larger phenomenon that cannot be simply defined by saying it is simply just a person who has a philosophical or political difficulty with Zionism, and is a phenomenon that has gone beyond that and has to be understood as a phenomenon that encompasses other aspects of action and thought and politics, not just a question of I don't like Zionism. Okay. All right. So we're going to take a look at this. Okay. A year after the Six-Day War, the French scholar Leon Poliakov, he's talked about a history of anti-Semitism. Historians are not prophet, and I will refrain from making any prognosis. Only the future will show, and to what degree, a hatred of the Jews, justified theologically, right? People hated Jews, say, before the French Revolution. Why? Because theologically, we denied Jesus. We were actively promoting a religion that, according to many theologians, we killed Jesus. We are opposed to Christianity, and we're evil. Okay, that was the theological anti-Semitism. A hatred of a Jew justified theological French and racially during Hitler, right? Hitler. Why were there churches in the ghettos of Europe during the Holocaust? Because it didn't matter if you were born a Jew and became a Christian, while prior to the racial theories of anti-Semitism, if you converted, they wouldn't expel or kill you, as happened in Spain and many other places. But when it came to Hitler, now even if you converted to Christianity, it didn't matter. You were still racially a Jew, and therefore the anti-Semitism had a racial basis based on your genes, which you could not change. We'll have a third incarnation under a new anti-Zionist guise. This is interesting. This is after the Six-Day War. Six-Day War 67. This is a long time ago. So he's saying maybe we should look at the history of anti-Semitism in three phases: theological, before the French Revolution; racial, during the late 19th, early 20th century; and now anti-Semitism has taken a new turn and it's become anti-Zionist. And this is somebody saying this in 1967. So it's really an astonishing quote. Okay. Now, and I was saying, under the pretext of a critical attitude towards the Jewish state and its supporters, an ancient passion, anti-Semitism, inspired by hatred, continue to make its way. I.e., he's saying, do we see a continuity between anti-Jewish beliefs, feelings, and actions in all three of these periods, and anti-Zionism is just the modern manifestation of something that goes back a long time. However, he said, it does so in different ways depending upon the region. Okay. He's offering his perspective as a sociologist. He studied anti-Zionism in the USSR. That is really a time frame when you you realize that in the Soviet Union, anti-Zionism became the name of their prejudices against Jews. How educational failures enabled it to gain hold of football, how it's becoming more. Now, listen, he is saying how anti-Zionism has become more dangerous, at least for now, than race-based anti-Semitism, and how Jewish Americans might begin to blaze a path forward. This is a very strong statement. And he's saying it's worse than the race-based anti-Semitism, which, by the way, we are seeing recurring in the United States. White nationalism, you may be familiar with the Great Replacement theory, i.e., Jews are involved in bringing the immigrants to the United States so that the dark people, the non-whites, can replace the white Americans as the major force in American life. Those things are having a recurrence on the right of the political spectrum. Okay. American anti-Zionism has been advancing through the scholarly association, right? Where is the basis for anti-Zionism? It is the universities, like it or not. It has become very popular in the universities, the student union, publishing houses, the school board, the grocery co-op. You know what he's talking about there? Sammy, what is he talking about? You familiar? There is a grocery co-op in, of all places, Park Slope, Brooklyn. And they have had votes in that co-op, and Park Slope Grocery Co-op is a big deal in Park Slope. I have relatives who are members of that, where you get cheaper groceries and you have to volunteer a few hours a week. It's sort of very communal-minded program, but should they carry Israeli products, right? And there has been great controversy there. So when he's talking about the grocery co-op, the city council, well, see what happens in New York, and now perhaps even the mayor's office, right? That's what he's worried about, right? We thought the notion of a mass political movement challenging Jewish claims to equality was assumed to be a relic of the past, but now what's happening? It is not merely the exercise of Israeli state power that is a growing portion of the American public has deemed problematic, but Jews claim to have a national right to self-determination in the first place. So here he's pointing out, he's distinguishing between critical views of the policies of the current government of the state of Israel versus the claim that all Israelis agree upon, and that is that Jews have a right of self-determination in the same place. And that sometimes is confused, right? I mean, I think I've made this clear. I'm not a great fan of Netanyahu's policies, but that is very separate from my steadfast belief as part of my Jewish identity that the state of Israel and the self-determination for the Jewish people is something that is part of what it means to be Jewish nowadays. Okay. And he says, how do we understand it? My understanding is shaped by a vibrant field of sociological scholarships. Now, he's a sociologist. He knows social movements. This leads me to see American anti-Zionism as a politics that is defined more by its actions than by its arguments. And because I recognize it as an independent phenomenon in its own right, rather than just a critique of something else, I spell out anti-Zionism and not anti-Zionism. Okay, is that clear? Comments or questions on that point, right? And by the way, since reading this article, anytime I write or say something, well, I don't want to say something, but when I write something, I believe he's 100% correct. That what we're talking about is get rid of the hyphen. We're talking about a phenomenon that is not defined as you might in a dictionary by saying, well, this is just about people who don't like the political program or the ideas of people who say they're Zionists. It goes way beyond that. Now he says, anti-Zionism is like any other political movement. It is not reducible to its intellectual dimension. In the real world, mass movements are always more than the manifestos. To understand what anti-Zionism is in practice, we should focus less on what its intellectuals say and more on what its activists do. And if I say, so what have you seen this activist do? Comments? Well, where might that lead us? Anyone follow the news?
Change in U.S. policy.
Change in U.S. policy. Okay, you see that very clearly change, but you also see that on campuses where anti-Zionists do not attack just the politics of the state of Israel, but they attack Jews just who are Jews. Why is it that on many campuses Jewish students feel unsafe? Right? Because anti-Zionists would either prohibit or restrict Jews in what they do on the campus. You can't be in our progressive circles. There was someone who was elected to a student council position. Oh, you're a Jew. We shouldn't have you on the student council because you're not objective, right? Or Jewish students just walking to classes feeling unsafe. And you hear that and you read that. And I just, I get a lot of fund appeals from different places, but someone from Rutgers was saying how Jewish students go to the Rutgers Hillel because they feel it's a safe place. And the Hillel, there has been an uptick in those places because Jews feeling unsafe on campus. Why? Because they're Jews, and it has nothing to do with what their politics might be, but it's Jews as Jews, right? Okay.
Rabbi, can I say something?
Yeah.
I feel that anti-Semitism is here to stay, and there's nothing we can do to get rid of it, because it's based upon jealousy of the Jewish people, and because the way Jewish people have accomplished and are accomplishing for humanity, and I think that the state of Israel doing what it does just provides more fuel for the anti-Semites because of its accomplishment. Thank you.
Okay. Well, there's no question that anti-Semitism is not going away. As a matter of fact, I would argue, and I agree with you totally, it's never going away. By the way, it was there before the state of Israel, and it's here with the state of Israel. And you go to places like Poland, as someone has pointed out, now we have anti-Semitism without Jews, right? There are places in the world that have no Jews, and all of a sudden, anti-Semitism, or Poland, where most of the Jews are gone, and so on. So here's his point here is that, you could say that at one point, consider to write as we have seen as anti-Zionism suggests that all is at stake is a reasoned critique of the ideals of Burl, Katznelson, Moshe Leib, Lillian Bloom, Eliezer Ben Yehuda, and other. In other words, if you say it's just anti-Zionism, oh, I don't like what Theodor Herzl said. That's anti-Zionism, right? And there were Jews who said that. So if we just say it's called anti-Zionism with the hyphen, you might think all of this is about is disagreements. And by the way, the Jewish community had those disagreements. I'm sure you're all aware that prior to 1948, very significant percent of American Jews would not consider themselves Zionists. And they were the Reform movement was clearly anti-Zionist prior to 48, right? Anti-Zionism is also not the first political movement to present itself as an antithesis to an imagined Jewish villain. There's, I think, what we have to see this as well. It's not just an opposition to a theological position or a political position, but an imagined Jewish villain. Zionism becomes the great evil of the world, and its elimination makes the world more just, right? It's not a matter of I don't like the theology. Coming from a background of anti-Semitism, which always has made the Jews the great evil force in the world, now that has moved over to Israel, okay? These were properly understood as a phantasmagoria conjured by the anti-Semitism, a socially constructed other to define oneself against. Okay, Charlie, did you have a comment?
Yes, I was going to say the UN resolution which said Zionism is racism.
Mhm.
They equate Zionism with racism, and that I think had a majority of the countries of the world in favor of that.
That's
I don't
correct.
know if it was ever passed. Yeah, it
It
was.
was. It
It was.
was. It was.
Yes.
I went to a demonstration against it. I remember
Right.
uh, going to demonstrations against that.
And now we have the issue of Israel being a Jewish state. A two-state solution, it has to be like the U.S., no official religion. I mean, according to
No, no, no.
some.
You mean sorry, you mean a one state solution.
Well, one state. Well, even two states, they're saying the Palestinians are being deprived their rights. Their Jews are racist in Israel because the Palestinians are second-class citizens.
Well, we can talk about serious issues about how the um, Israeli state has rules and laws for its citizens. We would all agree that all its citizens vote, all its citizens have freedom of
But the
speech.
right of return, if we open it up,
Okay, that's
if there's not a Jewish state, then anyone could return there,
right.
and it would no longer be a Jewish state.
Right. That's the question. The demographics, we can say that yes, by the way, and I would argue this as well, that no, the Israel hasn't treated its Arab citizens as well as it could, on the one hand. On the other hand, the Arab citizens of Israel have so many more rights than Arabs have in almost every other country in the Arab world, right? So,
Well, they've never resettled. Since
well,
1948, they have been displaced people. They've never been assimilated by the Arab world, and they're still in their camps and being
oh,
run
yeah,
by
right,
UNRWA.
right, right. We can make all those arguments that there was movement and displacement in refugees, and all the refugees from the states where Jews lived before 1948 who came to Israel, 800,000 of them were assimilated into Israeli society, while the Palestinian refugees were left as refugees in refugee camps. That is
If
true.
you think,
But,
if you,
Their
if you
children
think,
became refugees, and their children's children
yeah,
became. And now we got 15 million refugees. I mean,
right, right, right.
is there any other country that calls themselves an Italian state, a German
Right,
state,
right,
a so on state?
right. Well,
well, the religion, it's not,
right.
that's an ethnic. We're
No, but
talking
it's
about being a Jewish state.
yeah. Look,
Yes.
I did I want to go through. I want to make that clear. Yes, there are other states that call themselves Muslim states. There are many countries in the world that are Muslim states where non-Muslims do not have the rights as Muslims do. So the fact that there's a Jewish state is no different from that. And when people criticize Israel for being a Jewish state, that is a double standard. And the mayor of New York has done that, and I think he's using a double standard. But I want to try to get back to this, okay? And where he says, um, talking about boycotts, right? A perfect example of what Mary Douglas is a very famous scholar, highlights in her classic analysis of the concept of pollution. The human penchant for dividing the world into opposing categories of purity and defilement. Anti-Zionists establish themselves as a moral community by defining Zionism as a polluted category and then practicing rituals of distancing and exclusion. Right? That's what anti-Zionists do. They say if you're a Zionist, right, you can't have a summer camp in Canada with Zionists, right? Because it has to be excluded from decent humans, and they should lose their licenses. That's what that's quite different from saying I do or don't like the current policies of the current government of the state of Israel. Is different from saying if you have a summer camp in Canada, we have to exclude you from decent society. And he's pointing out that what the anti-Zionists are doing is excluding Jews who are just Jews, sometimes whether or not they're Zionists, and placing them outside the bounds of proper society, excluding, boycotting, and so on. So that goes beyond saying I don't like. I think Theodore Herzl's political positions were wrong. That's not. He's pointing out that anti-Zionism goes way, way, way beyond that. Okay, I want to go down. Yeah, And he's pointing out how this is very confusing. How could so many people, especially the young, educated, high-minded Americans, respond so enthusiastically to these calls to flood the streets and globalize the intifada, right? How is it that we have become, I'm talking about Jews, not just Jews who are strongly Zionist, have become the other, right? And his point that he makes is that when we think of anti-Semitism, we generally think about anti-Semitism as it was in the past, i.e., race-based, right-wing, Ku Klux Klan, that type of anti-Semitism, and that we are not prepared to fully understand how it's coming from a different place. Okay, that's his argument, right? Right. For the vast majority of Americans, including Jewish Americans, what we have learned about the othering of Jews, because for a half century, students in American middle schools and high schools have been given a single example of anti-Jewish politics, Nazi-style race-based anti-Semitism. That's not what since anti-Zionism doesn't fit into that model, therefore, it's hard to understand for many Americans why we see this as anti-Semitism, right? If you only think of anti-Semitism as what the Nazis did, then what's happening today, educated Americans say, well, it's not anti-Semitism, it's not race-based, it's just, we're against, well, what we're against ultimately is Jews, or part of what Jews stand for. Okay, so his argument is that that's one of the difficulties, because we always think anti-Semitism is something that the Nazis did. And we don't understand how anti-Semitism can take different forms. All right, is that clear? Okay. Americans, what's the result? Americans do not have a conceptual language for thinking about the othering of Jews in all its many flavors. Everything gets forced into the language of anti-Semitism with its Nazi and racist reference. This has allowed both anti-Zionists and the Jews who fight back to avoid engaging with the realities. Among the protesters in the Palestinian encampment, good-natured people were prepared to participate in languages and behaviors that threatened Jews, and to do so without moral qualms, because they understood their politics as not anti-Semitic, but just anti-Zionist, right? You've heard that? We're not anti-Semitic, we're just anti-Zionist, because they've been taught that anti-Semitism is the politics of right-wing racist, and the encampments express the politics of progressive anti-racists. So I'm a progressive anti-racist and an anti-Zionist. That is now becoming a norm. If you are a progressive anti-racist, if you're against racism, and who could be in favor of racism but crazy right-wingers, right? I'm a progressive and I oppose I am opposed to racism, and therefore I'm I'm an anti-Zionist. And that's the natural thing, and he's making that point, right? They would have noted that Americans were ostracizing Jews in the name and the tradition of anti-Zionism, a mode of antagonistic politics rooted in the Soviet Union, right? He's also pointing out American Jews don't know that the term anti-Zionist was really promoted by the Soviet Union. It was the Soviet Union's brand of anti-Semitism. The Soviet Union, right? Universalistic Marxism. We can't possibly be against people, but we can be against a political view, Zionism. But of course, that became anti-Semitism in the former Soviet Union, right? The Kremlin declared that its policy toward Jews was rooted in anti-Zionism, not anti-Semitism, right? And marginalized Jews there, okay? Jews, he points out American Jews know little about the history of anti-Zionism, right? It has a seal of approval from scholarly supporters. You are aware that on the university campuses, now, look, I'm going to say, I don't want to sound like I think the universities are indoctrinating, but the dominant politics on many campuses are to the left. And the dominant part of that is anti-colonialism. After all, who could be in favor of colonialism? We want people not to be colonized. Hey, remember, I do. I'm in the 6th grade in Ghana, and all those former colonies are becoming independent nations in Africa. We're anti-colonialists. But once you label Zionists as colonialists, then that's all part of the same academic mindset that says that just as anti-colonialism is bad, Zionism is colonial, and it's bad and evil and needs to be eliminated. Okay, that's the documentation they use. There's a wonderful book, by the way, disproving all of that. If you're any by Adam Kirsch, I think the name is that makes clear that is a very dominant view on campuses. Okay, learning out of time. Okay. Jews should stop indulging in the definitional debate, is anti-Zionism, anti-Semitism. When it is forced upon them, let they simply respond. Anti-Semitism is the othering of Jews from the American right. Anti-Zionism is the othering of Jews from the American left. All the rest is commentary. Now go and fight both. Comment to that statement.
Well, I would just accuse the left or the right. I think it's a mixture, or it's a composite rather than just labeling.
Okay, is Tammy?
I think he's right because we in America are fighting two things right now. We're fighting a president who's an authoritarian and a pedophile. And we have people like Josh Shapiro and Pritzker who are saying wonderful things, but we have a lot of progressives who are saying wonderful things against authoritarianism and pedophiles, but they're also saying nasty things about Jews. So we are entwined in this horrible situation. It's like it's choking us.
Right, because we feel sympathy for many of the positions of those on the left. And when I say the left, I'm not talking about slightly center left. I'm not talking about the extreme.
Right, exactly.
We feel that those are the positions that are good for Jews in a society of equality. And those same people who we like their positions on that, at the same time, are seeing now almost as a primary part of their political view that they become anti-Zionists.
Right. How many Democrats are now saying Gaza is genocide? Some of our good people are saying this.
That is correct. And I certainly, having tried to study this as much as I can, Gaza is not genocide. But
right.
if you want to say I don't like what Israel is doing, you choose a word that has so many negative, it's you don't call them Nazis, although some of the people on the right do, but you just call them genocide. And that has become now not only accepted, but almost standard talk in certain circles. But that goes along with what Professor Kellner is saying here.
Right.
The othering of Jews from the American left. All the rest is commentary. If pressed to elaborate, that anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism were state polities of 20th century's two most powerful total. Anti-Semitism was the Nazis. Anti-Zionism was the USSR. Okay, Rini, I saw your hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I think anti-Zionism might be a good excuse for anti-Semitism. I mean, there's always been, and probably, as Tammy said, always will be anti-Semitism. And it's a good excuse. I mean, I don't see demonstrations condemning Iran for what they do to their people, Iraq for what they do to their people, or other countries for what they do to their people or go to war. We don't see demonstrations against Russia for invading Ukraine as much as we blame Jews for whatever's going on. And the whole, I don't always agree with the government either. And maybe some things were very harsh, but people forget that Israel was attacked. So I think it's just a good excuse to say, well, we won't call it anti-Semitism, we'll call it anti-Zionism, but it's really an excuse.
Exactly.
Yeah, and it's also a mindset that sees the oppressed of the world as inherently righteous. That if you are oppressed, since you are oppressed, you're one righteous, you're the people we support, and it doesn't matter what you do. So that we do see on the left some really very astonishing support of terrorists and other such activities. But what I like about Kellner's article is he makes it very clear we should see anti-Zionism as that leftist anti-Semitism. Now, is it possible to be an anti-Zionist and not an anti-Semite? Yes, there are small groups of people like the Satmar Hasidim, for example, who you might put in that category. But I think Kellner makes it very clear how this anti-Zionism is really just bubbled over to, if you're a Jew walking around the Columbia University campus, you might not feel totally safe. Okay, Sima.
The problem with the campuses is that all the funding and all the people that are on campus that have nothing to do with anything, and they're just creating all this fear and all this hate and all the danger for the Jewish students. So the world doesn't see that. And the same thing like Renee was saying. I mean, yesterday I was listening to a report by an Iranian professor who was actually saying that they might have killed up to 40,000 people through the protests in Iran. And like no one says boo and no one complains about it. And they're also saying that Europe, especially England, is going to be most probably an Arab country almost because of all the mass immigration to the country and what they're doing there in all of Europe and all of England. And no one seems to care and no one seems to say anything. I mean, Israel's always been the scapegoat and Jews have always been the scapegoat. So, but no one seems to care about anything else that's going on.
Well, yeah, let's just say
That's what's always so hard,
yeah.
to
Yeah,
understand.
the disproportion. If the double standard, by the way, there have been demonstrations about some of those other places, but as you point out accurately, they have not had the dimension where campuses have been taken over or shut down.
But the world doesn't know the numbers. No one's really saying what actually happened there and other places in the Arab countries. They don't actually broadcast it or advertise it enough.
Well, the Iranian government is trying to minimize and prevent that information from getting out, and they're frankly doing pretty good on it, unfortunately. Yeah, Judith, I think you had your hand up.
Yeah, my daughter Jessica was on campus at Barnard in Columbia from 12 through 16. And as the BDS movement was taking hold, and there would be sheets from dormitories, windows, proclaiming BDS, and the temperature on campus, it was sort of first taking root at Columbia, and we know how wonderful Columbia is about supporting their Jewish students, did essentially nothing, but the students were uncomfortable, and going from one side of the campus, from the Barnard to the Columbia campus or vice versa, was very, very uncomfortable. And I sort of almost didn't get it when she was telling me about it. And now it was, anti-Zionist, but it was definitely anti-Semitic and anti-Jewish. It was not. It was a place of not great comfort for the Jewish students.
Right. Kelman's making that point where these groups are anti-Zionist, but in point of fact, if we look at what they do, what they often do is express their hostility towards anyone who is Jewish, right? And that's where this whole issue where the anti-Zionism just becomes clearly anti-Semitism. This is where we have these debates about these definitions, and I think the IHRA makes it very clear you can be critical of Israel, but there is a basic issue. And I was listening to a podcast, which again I recommend, Hartman Institute, the Daniel Hartman and Yossi Klein Halevi show, which points out what's something new about this anti-Semitism, and I think it's a point worth making, is that in the past, theological anti-Semitism, if you converted to Christianity, you could escape it. Racial anti-Semitism, you could not escape. It was part of who you were. But the anti-Zionism touches upon Jews also in the way that the anti-Zionists are saying, oh no, you don't have to repudiate being a Jew, just repudiate your Zionism. To which, of course, the vast majority of Jews would say, no, Zionism is an essential part of who we are, and to repudiate that makes repudiating ourselves. But for many younger Jews, that's not as clear. And that in a consumerist society where you make choices based upon what you see, what's good for you, and you make choices here, there, and everywhere, for younger Jews, shedding the Zionist part of being a Jew just seems like a perhaps good choice, and it doesn't seem that it's the denial of the essential person they are, as anti-Semitism was in the theological and race-based times. Okay, I'm trying to summarize what they said, and I thought they said some, and I think that's really an important way of trying to understand what's going on today. Okay, last comments. We've run over a bit, but I'll take a few last comments if anyone wants to say so. Sima?
I think Fran, are you raising your hand?
No,
I can't.
Okay.
Okay. God, I already forgot what I was gonna say. Oh yeah. As far as the younger generation, they just weren't brought up in the same kind of times. This is what they're seeing is the war after the Gaza Hamas attack and everything, and they don't understand that if Israel didn't exist, their safety would not exist. They just don't get that, obviously. Okay, but the bottom line is we talk about this, we talk about this, we talk about this. What are we going to do about it? How do we fix it?
Yeah.
No one's talking about
Well,
fixing it and doing something about it. We just
well,
talk ad nauseum about it, and nothing comes up with a plan, and nothing is done about it. Like, how do we do something about it?
well, that is correct, but we have seen some suggestions. I mean, Kellner says that we should really be clear and educating Jews to know that this anti-Zionism is really just another way that historically that we've seen anti-Semitism permutate into different types, and we should be aware of that history. I've seen
Well,
others.
that's it. People aren't
Yeah,
educated. They don't know the history. They
right,
don't know the background.
right.
They don't know anything, especially on campuses.
Right, and the people who created Birthright, we just came out with a report actually yesterday, where they say Birthright isn't enough. We have to create more deeper, long-lasting connections between Israelis and American Jews, which means literally starting with the relations they form on Birthright and continuing with programs to deepen those afterwards, with people going from America to Israel. And by the way, Israelis don't understand Americans either, as some of you, I'm sure, are quite aware. So that we need to deepen our connections and relations and understanding of each other. Okay. Yeah, Tammy, did you have one
Yes.
other?
Also, the New Jersey legislature did not pass the
Yes.
anti-Semitism rule. So I've been badgering the legislators in our area and telling them they have to do it.
Yes.
And I keep getting these emails and it says badger them. So everybody should do it.
Yes.
And I badger Cory Booker and Kim and Gottheimer. Gottheimer's doing a great job. But anything, I just make sure you write to them every week and just tell them how you feel. And it's like when we go out for these demonstrations, if we're healthy and the weather's good, sometimes you have to go out and do these demonstrations. And there are a lot of rabbis who went to Minnesota and helped get Trump back down from the atrocities that he was doing. And
Right.
also, you have to look at the world. You know, we're a wonderful, fabulous country, but what are the European countries thinking of us when we have an idiot as a leader who's an authoritarian?
Well,
You know, what are they thinking of us? So we're still good American people, and we have to act like good American people.
I think there's a
Rabbi, please, I think we
Charles.
have to moderate our tone a little bit. I mean, we're getting, I think, too extreme about commentary, please. It's not fair. It's not right.
Okay, let's say this. We certainly need education, certainly a closer tie. We certainly have an issue with the younger generations. And Tammy made a point, which I think is important for us as Jews and as Americans to be able to say, just as Europeans are reacting to Trump, and some Americans and American Jews are reacting to Netanyahu. And there's a difference between the policies of the current government in each place and sometimes other ways we feel about both of those countries.
I mean, no one has said boo about Kim voting against the aid to Israel. Kim,
Well, I'm not for
our
him
new
either.
senator.
Yeah,
I,
right.
I've written to Kim as well. So
I wrote them and told them it was
Right.
wrong.
I
You've gotta
think, I
fight.
think Tammy is right that you should be politically active in terms of our local representatives. There's a
So
lot to talk
think
about.
blaming everything on Trump is not the answer.
That is correct. We have a lot of internal work. We have a lot of internal work to do within our own community. Let's be all clear on that. All right, we've run over. I know
Between our people.
this was a little side trip from our ethics and morals. We're going to get back to that next week. And yeah, this is an issue. What is happening in terms of the Jewish cemeteries? There are a lot of intermarried couples. Can the non-Jew be? They want to be buried together. Who would blame them? Can we do that in a Jewish cemetery? Should we do that in a Jewish cemetery? What is a Jewish cemetery?
You'll have to answer the question is why did we even don't allow it? Like,
We'll
is it
take a
just-
look. We'll take a look
Right.
at
When we
at
go
how
through,
this works. We'll start with a chapter from Rabbi Barmasher's book and move from there to some more recent discussions. But we'll see you next week. Have a good time.
Thank you.
Week. I hope there's not too much snow. I hope you enjoyed this little diversion from our main topic.
Yes, thank you.
So, and I hope you learned. I mean, I'll tell you something. I learned a lot. That's what I like about teaching these classes. I learn a lot. So I got to read out some very interesting.
forces you to read things. Yeah.
Thank you, Rabbi.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good week, everyone.